Again, Brad of Brad Blog is joining us by video stream from California. This issue of the emergency declared by Governor Christ in Florida and allowing the lines, allowing the polling places to be extended to 12 hours. Brad, can you talk about this, these extremely long lines in Florida for early voting?
Yeah, I can. And frankly, this is to Governor Charlie Crist, a Republican. It's to his effort, especially in the midst of this all-out Republican war on democracy that we're seeing all across the country. So I'm going to give Governor Crist credit there for trying to ease the lines. In fact, the Republican legislature had shortened the early voting hours some time ago. And they're seeing all kinds of problems, all kinds of lines. The bottlenecks, unfortunately, are tending to be at the registration check-in process. Once again, these computers that are used to check people in to register to vote, that seems to be the bottleneck because, in fact, the state of Florida has moved to paper ballots. And I've seen some of these election registrars, supervisors of election down there in Florida, ordering more optical scan machines into the polling places when that's not the holdup. The op scan process is done at the end of voting. The holdup is checking people in. The bottleneck is the computers, the voter registration computers, and this comes back to some of the same draconian processes that, in fact, Charlie Crist did allow to be used, this no match, no vote process, where, you know, if I'm registered as Brad Friedman, but my driver's license says Bradley Friedman, I might be disallowed from voting. That's the holdup down there. In either case, extending the voting hours each day to something like 12 hours is a very good idea. I give them credit for that. And, boy, I hope folks will take advantage of getting in there and casting their vote come hell or high water.
This doesn't bode well for Election Day. I mean, it does that he extended the time of the polling places, but this is still early voting. This is before November 4th.
And I'll tell you, I've been calling this the November surprise for some time. I'm quite concerned that on Election Day, not only will the crowds be enormous, but that we are, again, going to see bottlenecks at that check-in procedure, where thousands, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of voters around the country, state to state, find that they are suddenly no longer on the voting rolls. And I've been speaking with people within the last week who were saying, hey, Brad, you were right. I didn't bother to check my registration. I voted in the primary, and suddenly I'm no longer on the rolls. That's going to be a bottleneck at the check-in. Republicans are going to be challenging voters in state after state, again, making what is going to be an extraordinarily huge turnout even worse by simply challenging people at the polls. That's going to lead to even longer lines. And, of course, Election Day is a work day, so a lot of folks can't afford to stand around for 3, 4, 8, 10 hours to cast their vote. We've got to do something about this mess, but I want people to hang in there, to fight for their vote, help other people vote, bring chairs, bring water, bring food, help your neighbors. This is a time for courage and for people to step forward and fight for that right to cast that vote that so many have fought and died for over decades in this country. This is what democracy is about. It's not a spectator sport. It's a participatory democracy. We're going to have to get in there and fight for each and every one of our votes this year, I'm afraid.
We're talking to Brad Friedman of bradblog.com. Harvey Wasserman also with us in Ohio, a battleground state. Harvey Wasserman, in Pennsylvania, John Boniface and all the voting rights groups filed suit to ensure that there be paper ballots, not just when all the polling booths in a polling place are shut down, but if even one is shut down, because, of course, it'll mean much longer lines. What do you expect to come of this?
Well, it's very important that we have paper ballots wherever possible. We want paper ballots available to people who show up and are confronted with a voting machine, an electronic voting machine, and would prefer to vote on a paper ballot. We're also urging, here in Ohio, you can vote early and get a paper ballot. And we're, as Brad has mentioned, and my co-author Bob Fitrakis has often pointed out, it's much better to vote on a paper ballot and to do it early. There will be huge lines on Election Day, which is to the credit of the American American people, but we expect here in Ohio and in Pennsylvania, and especially in the key states, Florida as well, that the Republicans will be in there challenging every voter, every little number in your Social Security number or your driver's license, middle initials that show up on driver's licenses but not on voter registration forms. These will all be at issue on Election Day. The Republicans have made it clear that they will challenge every vote that they possibly can and to introduce as much chaos as they possibly can into the election process. We want people also, if you have a problem voting, to find a lawyer and give a sworn affidavit. I am a plaintiff in the King Lincoln Bronzeville civil rights suit. This suit has had an enormous impact. You know, Jennifer Brunner is getting a lot of justifiable credit here in Ohio for cleaning up the election process, but it's been moved along by the fact that we've had a very effective federal lawsuit. Any discrepancies, any problems that people have voting, they should be accounted for with an affidavit, sworn testimony, so that these can be used in lawsuits in the post-election process.
Does that have to happen right at the point of voting? I mean, who is going to bring a lawyer to the polling place?
Well, that's the point. We want lawyers at the polling places. We want, as Brad has pointed out and as Bob has pointed out, we want everything videoed, and we also want lawyers available so that people can have guidance. A lot of people are not clear on what the process is, and a lot of people have been intimidated by the Republicans, both in 2004, we saw it in 2006. We're certainly going to see it in 2008 at the voting stations. The only way the GOP is going to win this election is to intimidate voters and knock as many of them off the voter rolls as they possibly can. Brad also mentioned people who may think they are registered to vote may come in for a nasty surprise when they get to the polls, and the time to check that is now. If you think you are registered to vote, or if you know people who think they're registered to vote, check with your Board of Election now and make sure that things are in order, because if you turn up on Election Day and have a problem, you're going to be part of the problem and not part of the solution.
Brad?
Yeah, and if I could add, in Pennsylvania, I'm really troubled about what's going on there because, in fact, we saw during the primary elections where voting machines were simply breaking down all over the state now, and they use touchscreens almost everywhere out there. Now, never mind the hacking, the error, the fact that they don't count correctly. The fact is, when they don't start up, voters can't vote. And incredibly, the Democratic Secretary of State out there decreed that, as you said, no paper ballots need to be given out unless every machine breaks down in a precinct. Harvey can tell you what happened in Ohio when just one machine broke down in many of those precincts in 2004. And the fact that the Democrats aren't raising holy hell about it, and that, in fact, John Bonifaz and the NAACP had to be the one to file suit there and say, oh, please give us paper ballots if a majority of machines break down. The fact is, the state law already allows paper ballots to be given out if just one machine breaks down.
Well, we don't think...
I'm afraid they're not even going to have enough paper ballots out there. And, you know, we have a history. We know what has happened in Pennsylvania and all of the other states. And I can't understand why Democrats aren't demanding that there be enough paper ballots in every polling place for every voter this year, because I guarantee we're going to be running out of them real quick.
Brad's absolutely right. And this term he used earlier, recalibration. When you hear the term recalibration, you have to think stolen election, because recalibration is a cover for re-rigging electronic voting machines. And we know that this went on in Ohio 2004. It's how George Bush got a second term. And recalibration means essentially that they're rigging up the voting machines, memory cards, and general mechanisms to allow the theft of an election. It is absolutely absurd that the Democratic Party has not stepped forward and demanded universal paper ballots everywhere. It should not depend on the breakdown of a voting machine to have universal paper ballots. To her credit, Jennifer Brunner here in Ohio requested that, did her very best to get it. We think she has to fight far harder to get universal paper ballots everywhere, whether the voting machines break down or not. And that's an issue that the Democratic Party and Barack Obama really needs to take up now. As he said, 1 week, we're really down to the wire. are. There need to be paper ballots everywhere, or this election could go the way of 2000 and 2004.
Well, are you talking to them in the Democratic Party? Why do you think Brad has raised this over and over in this interview, that he feels that the Democrats are not pursuing this half as strenuously as Republicans are pursuing their issues?
I have absolutely no idea why the Democratic Party has fallen down. They fell down in 2000, they fell down in 2004, and they're now, and we are in danger here. People are getting a little comfortable with Barack Obama's apparent lead in the polls. That could disappear with the pulling of a plug or the recalibration of a machine. This is a very serious situation. The only solution is hand-counted paper ballots, which are observed by the media and by both parties when they're counted, and there's no other way to guarantee a free and fair election.
Harvey Wasserman, Brad Friedman, we will leave it there for now, but of course we'll continue to pursue this. In fact, Democracy Now! Will be broadcasting live for 5 hours, beginning 7:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Tuesday night, in a Democracy Now! Election special for every television and radio station to take around the country. And on the morning after, we'll be expanding our broadcast to 2 hours, beginning 8 Eastern Standard Time in the morning.